All right, welcome to a BFC Sunday edition of the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. I am your Blunt Force Conservative. I'm Chris Hinkle. I'm a retired FBI supervisory special agent. I am a husband, a father, and a grandfather. I've been spending a lot of time with my granddaughter here recently and overwhelmed with work in my private business. So that's why I haven't been on here in a while. Um, but I'm seeing a lot of things going on and thought I would weigh in. I've had some conversations with fellow retirees and keeping up with the goings on in the news. And a lot of that has crossed my path in my history, especially as an FBI agent. We're going to talk about are you mad enough yet? Are you? We're seeing a lot of things going on in the Congress right now, especially in the Senate, in dealing with the SAVE Act, which is a piece of legislation that I think is the most popular piece of legislation um, outside of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I can't understand for the life of me why we can't get it passed. But we're going to delve into that. We're also going to talk about Robert Mueller and his passing. I'm going to give you my thoughts on that. You might be surprised at some of it. I'm going to give you a little bit of history as well on Robert Mueller and my time with him. I had about 4 or 5 interactions with him during my FBI career. But I wanted to talk about how we got here, how I got here. So I wasn't always as vocal in the public about politics. There's a lot of things that I, just from being an FBI agent and the way that I comported myself in the position, I kept things pretty much private. I was talking to some friends of mine, and we remarked that there were a couple of years they didn't know what I did for a living. We're a sports family. My oldest son was a state champion power lifter. Middle two sons played soccer. The middle son and the youngest son played soccer. The middle son played soccer here at Madison Central High School. And if you do some research, you'll find that Madison Central High School in Little Old Madison, Mississippi, is a powerhouse of soccer. Um, from 2008 until today, every high school soccer player that was at least in the 9th grade in 2008 graduated with at least one or more state championship rings at the highest level. There was a 4-year stretch when my middle son was in high school that they actually won 4 straight state championships and were ranked number 2 or 3 in the nation. That's comparing them to teams out of California and South Florida. They're that good. So God blessed us with getting located here in Madison, Mississippi. But I don't want to get off topic too much. But those families, we used to travel soccer together, and they were shocked after a couple of years when I can't remember what the topic of conversation was, but it came up that I actually was an FBI agent at the time. It just wasn't something I talked about. I really kind of kept compartmentalization between my private life and my work life. But let's talk about politics and how I got into this. The earliest I remember actually being vocal, I was in the FBI. So it was about, goodness, it's in the early 2000s, I think around 2004. And we were at a neighborhood picnic, and then chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, we lived in Fairfax County in Centerville, Virginia, and Jerry Connolly, the late Jerry Connolly, who was a representative for Virginia, passed away, I think, about a year ago. But anyway, Jerry was coming through as the Fairfax County Board of chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, and he was coming through our community picnic, and he was running for office for Congress. And he and I had some interaction that didn't go too well with him. He actually got laughed out of our neighborhood picnic because of the way he carried himself. But we'll talk about that another day. The next time I really got involved in politics outside the FBI was here in Madison, Mississippi, and it was during this COVID overreach of 2020. As many of you know that have been following me on this podcast or following me on X, I guess it's been about a year and a half now that I've been on X, you know that I led the civil rights program here in Jackson, Mississippi in the FBI. When I transferred from FBI headquarters in 2006, it was one of the 5 or 6 programs that they had assigned under me. So Jackson's a really small office, so we didn't have a ton of supervisors. And I came in having worked on the National Computer Crime Squad at the Washington Field Office in Washington, D.C., and had been at FBI headquarters and cyber division. I actually was brought down here to Mississippi to get the cyber program back on its feet, or actually on its feet. I don't think it ever was on its feet. But during that time, they had some transition as the FBI was going through some changes under Robert Mueller with the implementation of this focus on intelligence and making this intelligence directorate a priority. So they were creating these field intelligence group squads in the FBI. And because of that, they had to move some programs around. So in addition to the violent crime, gangs, drugs, computer analysis response team, cyber crimes, and a resident agency, a small office, 2-man office out of Meridian, Mississippi, I had to manage the civil rights program as well. So it really got me attuned to what I see in the Constitution, how we protect the liberties of individuals, of citizens. It's literally the one thing you swear an oath to do, whether you're an FBI agent or a member of Congress. That is your number one priority. But during the COVID time, I took my perspective on it was, okay, we don't know what this is. It seems to be some type of virus or sickness is coming across the United States. The government is clearly ill prepared to handle it at this time. I'm a patient person. I'm willing to give the government, the federal government, at least 60 days to get their head out of their butts and then tell me what's going on. And then I'll figure out how I and my family will comport. Now, I was still in the FBI at the time. Well, no, I wasn't in the FBI. That was 2020. So I wasn't in the FBI at the time. Had been retired for about a year. And I'm watching. So for 60 days, we just kind of took a breather, sat back, waited to see what was going to happen. After 60 days, I looked around and I said, I'm going to go back to living the way I want to live. I'm going to go back to exactly the way it was. Well, during the time that we started out with COVID here, I noticed that some of the things that the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves, now Tate and I have had some interactions. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a good husband and a good father. I think he made some terrible mistakes during the COVID overreach. I never just say it's because of COVID. It was an overreach of our government. And there were several executive orders that he put out. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Constitution, the way that government works and executive orders are not law. The executive branch is the Article 2 branch under the Constitution. The Article 1 branch is the one that makes the laws. The Article 2 branch is the one that executes and enforces the law. And then the Article 3 branch is the one that does the interpretation to determine whether or not the laws that are passed or the way that they're enforced, whether or not those comport with the Constitution. That's literally all that the Supreme Court's jurisdiction is the U.S. Constitution. So there were a couple of executive orders that were put out. The first one that Tate Reeves put out, and this one I remember, it kind of struck a nerve with me. It was in March 24th of 2020, and it was Executive Order 1463. And that one cut the mass gatherings down to 10 people. Dine-in restaurants and bars were suspended. Hospital and nursing home visits were restricted. And this I had a problem with because it violated the Constitution. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, a lot of people will say, well, the government wasn't sued. It wasn't taken into court. That doesn't mean that the Constitution wasn't in itself violated. So, mass gatherings. We're talking about freedom to associate. There's nothing in the Constitution. There's no emergency exception in the Constitution that says that the government gets to suspend your liberties for a period of time. So this executive order, first thing it violated was the First Amendment, freedom to associate. You can't just tell people because of a national, what you call a national emergency, and based on the recommendations of your state health officer, Thomas Dobbs, ours from the famous Dobbs decision on abortion, that you can't have people of 10 or more gathering anywhere. It also cut into people's ability to speak. You couldn't gather in a large group and voice your concerns to your representatives. I had a problem with that. So that one right there clearly was a violation of the Constitution. That's my professional opinion, my experienced opinion. And at some point, I'm going to have a conversation with Tate Reeves about that. And I'm going to give him a chance to answer about it. I'll even invite him, on this show. He can zoom in and we can go through these executive orders and we can chat about it. But what I have a problem with is any time that the government infringes upon your liberties. Literally, the Bill of Rights, the only thing it restricts is government. Nothing else. It doesn't tell us what we can do. It says what the government can't stop us from doing. The next one that he had was a stay-at-home, safer-at-home, shelter-in-place order, and that was a couple of executive orders. And this, limited your rights to travel. This was in April of 2020. Your personal liberty, your freedom of association, your right to work and livelihood. Businesses were shut down. Small businesses were told that they had to shutter, and only the large box stores could stay open. So you couldn't gather 10 or more people outside on your own, but 100 to 200 people could gather inside the Kroger grocery store or Walmart. I had a problem with that. I remember driving with my son in my pickup truck, and we were going out in the evening. We were actually just looking to see if there was any fast food restaurants that were open, just riding around, and we couldn't find any. But there was this feeling in the back of my mind, what happens if some of my very good friends at the Madison Police Department or at the Madison County Sheriff's Department decide to stop me and my son out there and tell us we can't go somewhere? I never had to cross that bridge, but I wonder how it would have played out. I definitely would have pushed the issue. So as I told you earlier, I gave it 60 days. And I said, after 60 days, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I did. So I remember this was in May, going into Kroger to do some shopping, and they had a mask mandate in place. There was the little lines on the floor where you could and could not walk, stay 6 feet apart, all of this crap that they put out there. And I decided I'm going to go by myself. I'm not going to take my wife or any of my kids with me. And I'm going to go into Kroger, and I'm not wearing the mask. And I'm going to pick up what I want to pick up. I'm going to talk to whoever I want to talk to. And I did it. You know what happened? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. The manager never stopped me, never said you can't come in. There were no guards or anything out front. I remember even as late as December going into Walmart and having one of the people that work at Walmart try to stop me at the front. I was going in to pick up something from, I'd ordered something. We had ordered something online. I was going to pick it up at the front desk, and they stopped me coming in and told me I had to wear a mask. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to wear it. That's all I said. I'm not going to wear it. And she just kind of looked at me, and then I just walked on past. You know what happened? Absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, when I walked into Kroger, I bumped into a good friend of mine from the Ridgeland Police Department that was there. Ridgeland is a small town adjacent to Madison. It's affectionately known as the Madison Ridgeland area. And his name's Eddie. And we got to talking. And I said, Eddie, what are you going to do if I go into a store and they tell me I can't come in unless I wear a mask, or they tell me I can't engage in commerce. What are you going to do? He said, well, are you causing a disturbance? Nope. I just say I'm not going to do it. He said, are you threatening anybody? Nope. You damaging property? Nope. He said, there's really not much I can do about it, Chris. There'd be nothing I could do. I said, but what about Tate Reeves' executive order? And Eddie said something that was pretty striking to me at the time, and I was proud of him for saying it. He said, I don't enforce executive orders. That's not an ordinance in this town. That's not a law. I don't enforce executive orders. I don't. Can't put you in jail for them. Can't go on trial for them. Can't do anything about it. So I found that if you civilly and cogently address an infringement of your rights, more often than not, you can come out on top. And we're going to talk about that. So, as I told you, I got frustrated with the overreach during COVID. I got mad about it. I decided to take some action. I had been in the FBI, and in the FBI, you're a lot of what you can say because of the Hatch Act, you're not allowed to engage in politicking. So a lot of that is FBI just tend to keep quiet. Now, you did see some people like McCabe, Strzok, all of them voicing their political opinions. Doesn't make it right. I carried myself to a higher standard than Peter Strzok, than Andrew McCabe, than Kevin Kleinsmith, Bill Priestep, any of those people. I carried myself to a higher standard. It's just the way I was raised. It's just the reverence that I had for becoming an FBI agent. So I got angry because of this overreach. And I decided to attend a school board meeting. And it's something I encourage you in your town to do. I went and listened in at a school board meeting, and they were debating on whether or not they were going to force the students, when they were coming back to school after the summer, if they were going to have to wear a mask. So this was August of 2020. And I show up at the school board meeting, and there's about 125 people at this meeting. 5 of those individuals were masked up. 3 of those 5 were doubled up masks. I recall it specifically. It was over here at Ann P. Smith Middle School. And what I found in that meeting was that 5 of those individuals wanted to force everyone to wear a mask, regardless of whether you were sick or not. The other 120 that were in there were like, let people make their own decisions. They didn't want to stop the people that were wearing a mask from wearing a mask. They just said, let everybody make their own decisions. So I interrupted the meeting and just kind of spoke up, not being belligerent or anything. I just said, hey, listen, it's a small town. I know you people on the board. I go to church with some of you. I've cried with some of you at funerals, seen some of you out on the soccer fields. And I want to tell you, I think that this room is full of smart people. And I think everybody in here wants what's best for their family. Now, there's a problem that we do have, and that is when we have a small number of people that want to dictate what everybody else is supposed to do. I said, there's about 120 people here, and I counted them, that just want to let everybody make their own decisions. And then there's 5 or 6 people here that want to make those decisions for everybody. Not a big fan of that. So we ended up pushing the issue, and they initially said, well, as long as our COVID levels in the area don't get above a certain number, we won't enforce a mask mandate. And that lasted about a week. So it took several times of going back to the school board. Now, during that time, we also found out some other things that were going on in the schools. This is an important lesson to stay involved with your local community, because we found that there was an infection that wasn't a virus that was going through the school, and that was DEI. diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was going through the school in the guise of ESL, emotional social learning, and it allowed some literature, some focus of things that weren't of community interest to infiltrate the school and infect the minds of our children. So we began asking questions about that, and some of the parents got together and figured out, looking through the library system, that there were a lot of these uh, LGBTQ type books that were of no educational value, and we started confronting the school board on it. And then we took it to the next level. When we weren't getting responses that we were looking for from the school board, and we didn't have an election coming up to vote some of them off, there was no mechanism to have them recalled and removed. We looked into another avenue, and that was their surety bonds. So every elected member of office has to have a bond, an insurance bond, and that bond can be called into question if there is a violation of people's civil rights, violation of their oath. So we started asking for things. We first asked for a copy of the insurance policy, the surety bond, and we got a copy of that. We asked for a copy of the oath. And then we put together a paper, and basically it was a rough draft of a claim against their surety bond. And we gave that to the board, and we said, no more COVID restrictions, and we want these books out of the library. And we said, we're serving you now with our intent to file a suit against your surety bonds. We're about 5 of us that put this together, just 5. And guess what? Before we left that meeting, they voted out all the COVID restrictions, and it drew enough attention to start working on getting those books out of the library. You can make a difference. So I ask you, are you mad enough yet? So let's go down and look at some things in history. How many of you remember back when we had some of our Navy over in Iran, this during the Obama administration, and they were for a short period of time taken hostage by the Iranians? Remember them in the boat, hands, behind their backs, hands up, all of that. And what was the response? Not much from the Obama administration. As a matter of fact, it was around that time that this happened. And tell me if you remember this. $400 million for Iran. $400 million for Iran. Remember the pallet loads of cash. Well, a little bit of history about this pallet load of cash. So the Obama administration sent this cash to Iran, and there were 4 hostages that were released. Now, they said this wasn't payment to get the hostages back. They said this was a settlement that was due to the government of Iran from back in 1979. It was a pre-1979 arms deal under the Shah of Iran. And they basically, we had to pay for some equipment that it was supposed to be $400 million for military equipment that was never delivered. In other words, Iran had given, the Shah had given the United States $400 million to buy some equipment. It never got delivered. Well, what happened in 1979? The extremists, the terrorists, overran the embassy, took over the country, and the Shah had to leave the country. So the government of Iran at that time ceased to exist. It's a totally different government. And it really looks like it is what it is. Occam's razor, usually the most logical, reasonable answer that you can come up with is usually the answer. I don't care what Obama said. That money was given to Iran to release those hostages. Because guess what? Right after they did that, the hostages were released. So it became a symbol of criticism. It was, political rhetoric, all of that. Listen, the money was given, 4 hostages were released. If you can't connect those dots, I don't know what is. Did that make you mad? I was mad at the time. I was mad at the time when I was watching what was going on with our sailors over there. I'm old enough. I was 15 years old when the hostages were taken in Iran. And I remember each night watching Ted Koppel and the countdown of how many days the hostages had been in captivity. So enough that it affected the outcome of the election when Jimmy Carter was voted out of office and Ronald Reagan came in. And Ronald Reagan spoke a lot like Donald Trump does right now. Says what he says, means what he says. And the Iranians knew that once Reagan got into office, there was going to be hell to pay if they didn't release those hostages. So it wasn't long after he got sworn in, they were brought in. But were you mad enough yet? Because guess what? The same people that were in the Senate and the House, they stayed. It wasn't them that got the hostages back. It was President Reagan and his perseverance, his resolve, his determination, his sheer will to get it done. So are you well represented? Let's take a look at the state of Kentucky right now. Anybody remember this?
Okay.
Senator, you're up for election in 3 short years. What are your thoughts on it?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing that.
That's okay. What are your thoughts on running for re-election in 2026?
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator Penny.
Yep.
Penny.
head outside, so come with us. Okay.
So did.
Are you mad enough yet? I remember that. Who do you think's running that office? Do you think Mitch McConnell has all of his faculties? Does he not remind you of Joe Biden trying to debate Donald Trump, that second debate with Donald Trump, where he just got lost on stage? Who do you think's running his office? Do you think that McConnell is running his office? Or do you think someone like the lady that was right there, and I haven't found her name yet, but I will. And I'll make a call to the office. Why do you think he's in office if he can't make the decisions on his own, if his faculties aren't there? Who do you think's making the decisions on his votes and telling him what to do? Let me give you a quick story. So we've got this SAVE Act, and we're going to get into the SAVE Act in a few minutes. But we got this SAVE Act, and it's widely popular with the citizens. I mean, 80-something% across all parties want the SAVE Act passed to protect the integrity of our elections. And I decided to call one of my senator's offices. So I called Senator Roger Wicker's office here in Jackson, Mississippi. Spoke with a gentleman there. And I said, hey, I got a question for you. Is Roger Wicker on board with passing the SAVE Act? And his answer was real quick. He almost cut me off mid-sentence. Oh, Roger Wicker is a co-sponsor of the SAVE Act. I said, okay, that's not what I'm asking you. I said, is he supporting passage? And he cut me off immediately mid-sentence. Didn't want to hear what I had to say. And he said, I just told you he is a co-sponsor. I said, sir, I'm a constituent. I live here in Mississippi. Roger Wicker is one of my senators. I would ask you to please let me finish the question before you cut me off mid-sentence. Senator Mike Lee has a push right now that we're going to debate this thing until it passes. We're going to get this thing passed. He is definitely working his tail off to do it. One of the few senators, maybe the only senator, that's actually putting his shoulder and against the grindstone and pushing. And I said, do you support Mike Lee's policy of initiate the filibuster and just filibuster this thing till it passes? Well, the guy cut me off again mid-sentence, and he said, listen, I don't know. We don't know what, anything about Mr. Lee's proposition. You'll have to call Senator Wicker's DC office. I said, I'm just asking the question. You work for him. And he said, listen, I got to get off this train. And then he hung up on me. Who do you think's running that office? Think Roger Wicker's running his office? Or do you think a bunch of unelected individuals that work in the office are the ones that are pushing everything? So, are you mad enough yet? What do you know about Lisa Murkowski? Let's take a look at her history. Lisa Murkowski, senator. Like Roger Wicker, she was appointed into the position initially. Like the other senator of Mississippi, Cindy Hyde-Smith, was appointed into the position initially. When you get appointed into that position, you get all the perks of the job. You get the contacts with the donors, the political action committees, all of the businesses. If you're like Roger Wicker and you're beholden to the military industrial complex, you get to meet with all of them. You get to cultivate those relationships. And then usually when you get appointed, it's usually about 2 years left in the term of that senator's career that you're replacing. Once you're appointed, you get to run almost as an incumbent. So Murkowski was a little more unusual in that. It was a little more nefarious, or I will say a little bit of nepotism here, because in 2002, she became a U.S. senator when she was appointed by her father, then Governor Frank Murkowski, to fill the vacancy. That's 2002. 2 years later, she ran to get reelected, and she won by a little over 7,000 votes. In 2010, she lost the Republican primary to Joe Mueller, but she managed, for only the second time in the U.S. Senate history, to win the general election by a write-in campaign by 10,000 votes. Now, in the write-in campaign, let me tell you how it operates here in Mississippi. You can't win via a write-in campaign. Impossible. There is a spot to write names in, and those names will be entered into the record. However, our state laws will not allow that person. You have to be on the ballot to be elected. You will not be elected from a write-in campaign. There could be 10,000 votes, 9,999 of them are write-in for me, for Chris Hinkle, and one vote for the current sitting member. The current sitting member wins that. That's just the way it works in Mississippi. So in 2016, she won by 47,000 votes out of Alaska's registered 51,000 new voters that came in between 2014 and 2016. And none of those 51,000 new voters required proof of citizenship to register to vote. In 2022, she won again. She won again based off of ranked voting. Now, ranked voting says we can put up 10 candidates, and they will, if nobody makes it over the 50% mark, then they'll take the top few candidates, and those are the ones that appear on the ballot, regardless of race, of party. They could be Democrats or Republicans. You could have 5 Democrats or 5 Republicans, or 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans, but you're going to rank them based on, okay, who are you going to vote for? Who do you want first? I want this person. Well, if you can't get that person, who's next? So you put somebody else number 2, somebody else number 3, number 4, number 5. So there's 5 people on the ballot, and you rank them 1 through 5. They count those votes up. Whoever gets the most ones on that ballot ends up winning. Are you mad enough yet? You think that's fair? Let's look at what Lisa Murkowski, remember, 51,000 new voters in Alaska. They didn't have to provide proof of citizenship, and she won by 41,000. Here she is right now on the Senate floor. the only Republican senator standing up and arguing against passing the SAVE Act. It says here, and this was reported by Turning Point's Andrew Colvett, Lisa Murkowski has been on the Senate floor for 10 minutes. As a member of the GOP, she's doing an excellent job of advocating for the Save America Act. Oh, wait, no, she's not. She's explaining why apparently it's too hard to overcome logistical and geographical issues because of sled dogs and other things far less important than our nation's sovereignty. The amount of effort these people put into opposing something as simple as voter ID is astronomical. It only proves how afraid they are. I think Lisa Murkowski is afraid. If we have a free and fair election, I don't think she wins. Now, if Murkowski is not popular, if she is antithetical to what we sent President Trump and the majority in the Senate and House in DC to do, if she's against that, you'd think, oh man, it's got to be the leadership in the Senate, the big wigs, the big guns that you hear there, Mitch McConnell, Tim Scott, any of the big wigs in the Senate, surely they wouldn't stand by and say, well, wait a minute, she shouldn't be able to get in there. There should be something wrong with this. You'd be wrong. 2022, Tim Scott. We need strong leaders like Lisa Murkowski, someone who has worked tirelessly for the people of Alaska her entire career. Alaska, please join me in supporting Lisa for Senate. Endorsement from Tim Scott. Now, Tim Scott has a unique position within the Senate leadership because he controls the money that the Senatorial Reelection Campaign Committee can put out and assist you in your run for reelection. They can throw a lot of weight, a lot of endorsements, a lot of money your way. They can steer PACs toward your way. That's how it works. Sad. Are you mad enough yet? Are you? Let's see if you're mad. So I remember there was, I had a conversation with my congressman, Michael Guest, and this was right after the Butler, Pennsylvania shooting President Trump, then candidate Trump. And they had taken to task the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, and they had voted to impeach him. And of course, the Senate, needing a majority of people to vote to convict, in other words, remove him from office, we knew that wasn't going to happen. The numbers just weren't there. So you would think that the Republicans would be angry, our Republican senators, that they would call him on the carpet. I didn't support the impeachment of Mayorkas. I think it was a fool's errand. It shouldn't have been done. You really want to get the attention of a department in the U.S. government, and I know this having spent 33 years in government, 25 of it as a federal agent, 20 plus of it with the FBI, serving at the highest levels. You really want to get their attention? Cut their funding. Hold their funding back. Don't give it to them. That's what you do. I had that conversation with Guest. He looked dumbfounded when I talked to him about it and said, why don't you use the power of the purse and say, Mr. Mayorkas, you're violating the Constitution. You're allowing people to come across our border. You're allowing non-citizens to circumvent and cause crimes and mayhem in our cities. You're infringing upon the liberties of the citizens. You got to stop this. And if you don't stop this, I'm going to stop your funding. They have the power of the purse. They could do it. They just won't. So you would think that because Mayorkas was such a horrible man and allowed all of this stuff that we're having to deal with now with immigrations and customs and why they're fighting so hard, why they don't want ICE funded, how would you think that somebody like Senator Tom Tillis out of North Carolina would treat Mayorkas? Let's listen in.
Case to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in payout. It's going to be another reason why it's a crisis and not just a situation we're trying to work through. Thank you, and I wish you good health.
Thank you, and I wish you good health.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, he had Mayorkas was shaking in his boots, wasn't he? I wish you good health. Now let's contrast that to the way that Senator Tom Tillis talked about Kristi Noem.
Am I disappointed,
with
Secretary Noem?
Secretary Noem.
Because we're not
Because
going
we're
after
not going
enough
after enough people who did this damage
at the
at the expense of running numbers that Stephen Miller wants out of the White House.
We just want
We
numbers.
just want numbers.
We want 1,000
We want
a day,
1,000
6,000 a day, 9,000 a day, because numbers matter, right? No, they don't
No, they
matter.
don't matter.
Quality matters.
Quality
Not
matters.
quantity,
Not quantity,
quality.
quality.
And what we've
And
seen
what
is
we've
a
seen is
disaster.
disaster.
Under your
Under
leadership,
your
Ms.
leadership, Ms.
Noem,
Noem,
a disaster.
a disaster.
What happened? He didn't wish her good health. What happened? Are you mad enough yet? I've had my interactions about Tom Tillis. I got angry enough that in talking to friends of mine up in North Carolina, they hate him. They cannot stand him. There was no way in Hades he was going to be reelected, which is why he decided to retire. I started a countdown clock. I'd go in every day and I try to calculate. I would try to calculate when. Sorry, I'm typing something here. I started the countdown clock, and apparently it got back to him. And I had a news reporter from out of North Carolina contact me and ask me about it. Said that the senator was it aggravated him that I counted down when he was going to leave office. I said only this many days left till Tom Tillis is no longer a senator, and that actually unnerved him, which I thought was hilarious. So these guys think that they're just above us. Are you mad enough yet? What about here?
Elected, would you vote for congressional term limits? And I'd like to have an answer from each of you.
Let's start with Sue Collins.
Let's start with Sue Collins.
You support term
You
limits,
support
and
term limits, and I have pledged that if I'm elected, I will only serve 2
regardless
terms,
of whether
regardless of whether term limits law, the constitutional amendment passes or
12
not.
years is long
12
enough
years
to
is
be in
long
public
enough to
service,
be in
make
public
a
service, make
contribution, and then come home.
and then come home. And
Wow. If you look at that picture, she aged a lot in 12 years, didn't she? It was a problem. You know when she first was elected to the Senate? 1996. 30 years ago. She took over, she defeated Democrat Joseph Brennan to succeed retiring Senator Bill Cohen. And she took office in early 1997. And since then, she's won elections in 2008, 2002, 2008, 2014, and 2020. And she's up for re-election now in 2026. It's a long 12 years. Why do you think she didn't keep her word? Why do you think that the mainstream media won't ask her about it? Think Fox News is the most conservative outlet that's out there? Maybe. But I know that their anchors won't ask her that. Senator, you said in 1997 that you would only serve 12 years. Why are you still here? Why are you still here? So let's go back to Kentucky. So Kristi Noem is moving into a different position under the administration, and Senator Markwayne Mullin is coming in as the nominee to take over for Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. Now, I've got my thoughts on Homeland Security. I wasn't a fan of it when it started up. I think it's just the government tends to put more and more departments out there when we could probably get rid of a lot of them. Real quick note, and do a Grok search on this. Go back to when Rick Perry was running for president, and on the stage they said, Governor Perry, he was governor of Texas, you have mentioned that you would close down some departments in the government. Can you name 3 departments that you would shut down? He said, absolutely. He could only name 2. He couldn't think of what the third one was. He was ill prepared for the question. Now, of course, he wasn't elected president. And I think Rick Perry was an okay guy, but I think it's pretty clear that Perry wasn't up for the task. I don't have any problem naming 3 departments. I can name them right off the top of my head right now. Department of Education, go away, give it back to the states. And we need to check in on the Trump administration, hold them accountable on what they're doing, what Linda McMahon's doing to shut that department down. The other is Department of the Interior. Let the states manage their own resources. There's very little resources out there that need to be managed by the federal government. The states can handle what's going on inside their states. Doesn't mean they're going to abuse it. You could step in with other laws and stuff. You don't need an entire department to do that. And the other is Department of Energy. Time for it to go away. Don't need it. It really hasn't done much. But you know what's unusual? All 3 of those departments have investigative agencies under them. Department of Education has an investigative agency. So does the Department of Interior. And so does the Department of Energy. Department of Energy has special agents, 1811, Series 1811, like an FBI agent working for them. So Markwayne Mullin, I'm not a huge fan of his. I think he's a bit of a bulldog. I had a problem with what happened on January 6th, where he was lauding the guy that shot Ashley Babbitt. I think it was a bad shoot. I've mentioned that before. He was also very appreciative of what the Capitol Police were doing to protect them. It wasn't as bad as you think it was. It's just people that are unfamiliar with danger of what scares them. But another guy that I would say has got too much estrogen in his system, and Markwayne Mullin has no love for, and I don't care for either. That's this guy.
I think there are anger issues. I think there's a lack of contrition, both about the violence that's perpetrated on me, the violent episode in the Senate committee where he's told the media that he doesn't regret it. He's also told the media there, as he said again today, that there's a historical precedent for violence, and painting and doing happen all the time. I pointed out, well, it was illegal 170, 200 years ago. They would actually flee, and they would do it in areas they could find where the law didn't. Sometimes they actually go to Canada, sometimes they go to the other. But the mass of civilized response, even in the 1830s, was against it. That's why dueling was made illegal. The fact that he can't bring himself to say, really, we shouldn't settle political questions with violence. I think that would be a terrible example for ICE and for we're in the midst of hiding other countries where there needs to be direction from the top. And a guy who brawls, a guy who say he's sorry about, wishing violence on me, really applauding the attack that happened on me. Can't come to say that, I don't know. From my point of view, either of ICE.
So Rand Paul was being asked if he was going to vote to get him out of committee, Senator Markwayne Mullin, for the position of Secretary of Homeland Security. And true to his word, he said he was not going to vote for him, and he didn't. But he got through the committee because John Fetterman's on that committee, a Democrat, and a Democrat voted for him. I think Fetterman and others see the same thing that I do. You need a sheepdog. You need somebody that knows how to handle themselves, that's got confidence, that if they need to, they can be violent if they need to. One of the things that I've advocated for friends and other family members is do yourself a favor and learn to fight and learn to fight violently. And there's a difference between boxing, jujitsu, karate, judo, things like that. Those things are great and they can really help you in handling yourself. But you also have to have that mental resolve, or are you willing to do what it takes to survive? I don't think I would want Rand Paul in a foxhole with me. I just don't think that he has the will to fight. And he was talking about, dueling, because there was a famous incident here where Markwayne Mullin was talking to the Teamsters president, and the Teamsters president, he had some words and said, you want to throw, basically you want to throw down, we'll do it right now. And Markwayne Mullin was ready to get up and do that. Now, Markwayne Mullin has not been in law enforcement. He's not been in the military. He's somebody that I think, trains regularly. I don't even think he has a degree, which I don't, put a lot of stock in degrees. I have a degree, but I don't really think it's necessary to have that degree to be successful in life. But I think this is what, weak people do, is they look for a way out of it. I think that Rand Paul, if he was going to be attacked, he'd want somebody like Markwayne Mullin there to protect him. So, real quick, and then we're going to get into Robert Mueller and the president's comments. Let's talk about the SAVE Act. So the SAVE Act has multiple amendments in it, but the primary thing is to keep, to make sure that only citizens are voting in our elections. Now, I do think that happens, that there are non-citizens voting in the elections. I do think that a lot of states make it easier for non-citizens to vote in the elections. And I think that the bulk of what I like about the SAVE Act is the fact that it keeps, men out of women's sports. It's a good bill. It's one of the most popular bills that's out there. Like I said earlier, over 80-something% support it. 74% of Democrats support it. But you're seeing a problem. So when John Thune, the leader of the Senate, leader of the Republican leader, and the Senate Majority Leader and the leader of the Senate, because the Republicans have the majority right now, he said the votes aren't there for it. Well, what is he talking about? Now, he's trying to tell you that there's this arbitrary number of 60 votes that has to be met. That, we can't nuke the filibuster. It served us for years. I don't know. He said even one time he was being interviewed by Brett Baer on Fox News, and he said, I've looked back in our history. I can't think of a time during modern times that the filibuster has been used to pass legislation. Well, let me remind Senator Thune about a little bit of our history. So, in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was being put forth. President Johnson supported it, and a number of Republicans and Democrats supported it, but not enough to pass it. So, they filibustered. They had they opened the floor up for a debate. Now, at that time, the majority, it was a super majority, 2/3 of the Senate that had to vote to end debate on a measure. As long as you held the floor, 2/3 of the Senate had to vote to stop the debate. You could have votes right and left. Now, if the individuals holding the floor cease to hold the floor, you can call for a quorum. That's basically, an assessment to make sure that you have at least 51, a majority of senators that are there. And if the debate stops and you have that quorum, then you can actually pass the legislation with 51 or 50+1. So, but if you have enough there to vote against it, then of course it doesn't move on. You can keep having debate, you keep calling for quorums, but eventually somebody's going to lose. Somebody's going to tap out. And that's exactly what happened. So they started debate. It was about 6 days a week. It wasn't 7 days a week, but about 6 days a week, all day long, senators had to speak and they had to hold the floor. They had to stay in the area. They had to stay in DC. They had to stay in the Capitol. That went on for 60 days. After that, the opponents to this bill said, that's enough. And cloture was gained 71 to 29. They ended debate. And then they had the vote. And the vote passed overwhelmingly. Why? I have my theories. I think it's likely because nothing else was being worked on in the Senate. And the donors, the people in the military industrial complex, other businesses that get government money through government contracts, were like, you're cutting off our life's blood because you guys can't get this passed. Get it passed. And it got passed. We also had President Johnson that gave them the Johnson effect, which is he would come out starkly against you in the media. He would divert funds away from your district. He would push to have the Senate Majority Leader, take responsibilities away from you on committees. I mean, he was ruthless, but he got that thing done, and he got the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed. The only thing that's changed, no filibuster rules have changed since then. None. Zero. The only thing that has changed is the number of votes that you need for cloture to end debate. And that changed in March of 1975. Then Senate Majority Leader put forth a vote, and the Senate voted on it. And they changed it from 67 votes, which is 2/3, to 3/5 votes, which was 60 votes. That's the only thing that's changed. And when Senator Thune comes out and says, we don't have the votes, he's not talking about the votes for cloture, the 60 votes. Of course you don't have those. The Democrats don't want it right now. But how long can they hold out? You've met senators and representatives before. They're mostly lazy. I spent 5 months in Baghdad, working in a Baghdad prison with the FBI back in 2009, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. If I could do that, pretty much standing on my head, surely our senators that are getting paid close to $200,000 a year could do the same thing. Why not? Are you mad enough yet? Are you mad enough yet that you're going to call your senator and tell them to get off their ass and pass this bill? Because I will argue that the SAVE Act of 2026 is more important to the preservation of our republic than the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It is more important. It is that important. We've got to stop the mail-in voting. That is huge. That's way more than the illegals voting. The illegals are going to end up voting. The main reason that you see so many illegals in these areas is they get counted, and that is for apportionment in the House and funds and things like that based on those numbers, not on citizens, it's just on population, straight population. So whenever Thune says we don't have the votes, ask him like I was asking out of Roger Wicker's office, are you willing to institute the filibuster? You're not nuking the filibuster by instituting it. You're saying, we're all going to work our butts off. We're going to stay here and we're going to work 24/7 until we get this thing passed. That's what Mike Lee is saying. I'm not hearing that from John Thune. I'm not hearing that from Roger Wicker. I'm not hearing that from Cindy Hyde-Smith. I'm not hearing Michael Guest call out the senators for not doing their job. I hear Anna Paulina Luna doing that, of calling out senators for not doing their job. I hear others in the House saying, we won't vote on any legislation that comes from the Senate back to the House. We won't vote for it until the SAVE Act is passed. This thing will play out and it can pass. It can do it. I believe what Mike Lee says. Now, I want to caution you in listening to some of these other senators that have these other ideas. So you've got Senator Kennedy, Mr. Allshucks Kennedy, out of Louisiana, and he says, well, why don't we just, let's stop this, let's pump the brakes on this right now, and let's just pass it through reconciliation, because we can do that with only 51 votes, or 50 plus one with the vice president. Well, here's the problem with that. Before it can go through reconciliation, there is a Senate rule that they put in place that it has to go through and be scored by the parliamentarian. Now, the parliamentarian is a female. I don't have her name here in front of me. Let me look up real quick who she is. Who is Senate parliamentarian? While that's pulling up, the Senate parliamentarian, her name is Elizabeth McDonough. Now, Elizabeth McDonough wasn't elected by anybody. She is not a representative of any state, any district. She is not an appointed individual anywhere in government. The Senate parliamentarian, Miss Elizabeth McDonough, she's held that position since 2012, since the Obama administration. And she was appointed by then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. She previously worked in the parliamentarian's office from 1999 as an assistant parliamentarian, advancing to senior assistant in 2002. The role is supposed to be nonpartisan. Yeah, you really think Harry Reid put somebody on that's nonpartisan? But anyway, the parliamentarian's the one that scores these bills. She serves as the official advisor of the Senate, interpreting its standing rules, precedents, parliamentary procedures, and related statutes. And they provide guidance to the presiding officer, senators, committee staff on policy procedures, including during high-profile processes like budget reconciliation. Now, that's what Senator Kennedy was wanting to do, the budget reconciliation. It's also known as the Byrd Rule. So the parliamentarian has to look at it, and you know what happens? If she says, this doesn't meet the criteria of budget reconciliation to add the SAVE Act in here, it gets stricken from it. Now, if it stayed in, if she says, well, it is part of the budget process and the reconciliation, then yes, Senator Kennedy is right. It would only take 51 votes. They can just vote on it, and that's it. There's nothing that the Democrats can do to stop it. They could try to take over the floor and filibuster, but eventually that teeters out. But if she doesn't score it, the Senate, you're going to ask, can the Senate just override her? Because she's not an elected person. We didn't send her up there to do that. We didn't vote for Senator Reid to do this. Well, guess what happens if she scores it out of there and you want the Senate to override it? Then it comes out of reconciliation, and it has to be voted in by a supermajority. It takes a supermajority to override her. You have to have that 60 votes to override the parliamentarian. Now, she was put into place by Harry Reid at the time, who was the Democrat Senate Majority Leader during the Obama administration. Really think she's going to give the Republicans a win? I doubt it. All right, we're coming to a close here. I want to get into this Robert Mueller death. So when I came into the FBI in the late 90s, Louis Freeh was the director. I was there when Robert Mueller became the director. I think it was September 4th of 2001. Of course, a week later, we had the horrific events of 9/11, and he was thrown from the frying pan into the fire. And initially, people looked at Mueller as somebody that was trying to save the FBI, because senators were really looking at, because we were caught flat-footed on 9/11, they were really looking at splitting portions of the FBI off, taking its intelligence mission function off and giving that to another agency, or giving it likely to the CIA. And then the law enforcement function would stay with the FBI. That wouldn't work out constitutionally, because the CIA has no jurisdiction inside the United States. They can't collect. They're not supposed to collect on citizens. I'm sure that they do. But anyway, they they were looking to split the FBI up, and Mueller was, lauded as this person that was going to keep it together because he got caught flat-footed. And you can listen to my good friend Steve Baker, who wrote a book about the FBI and what went on during that time, and how Mueller was humiliated in the office with President Bush, when he was giving an account of what we've learned, how we figured out who did it. And we figured out who did it pretty daggone quick. But when he gave that information to President Bush, Bush said, "I don't want to know how they did it. I want to know what you're doing to protect us tomorrow. What are you doing to stop the next event?" And that's what the CIA was able to provide to him. Here's our resources and what we're hearing on the ground about planned events after this. The FBI was caught flat-footed. And Mueller, I had probably 5 interactions with him during my time in the FBI, from a visit down to the Jackson, Mississippi office, to a couple of interactions with him when I was a desk supervisor, and I'd been voted in as the mid management action committee representative for Jackson, which meant, they flew me up to DC and we had meetings. All 56 field offices had their own representatives, the mid-max, what they call them, and had some meetings with Mueller then. And then I had one interaction with him via email when my classmate Jerry Job had passed away from the effects of 9/11, from when we responded to the Pentagon. And Jerry developed cancer, and it took his life in 2010. And I had sent an email, and Mueller was famous for, this protocol and stuff, but I just said, it's my classmate. I'm gonna reach out to him. And I did. And I sent him an email, and normally somebody from the staff is answering and going through his email and responding. This, I think, actually came from him, and he was very kind about Jerry, that he had visited with Carmen and the kids before Jerry had passed. And that meant a lot to me that he did that he took the time to respond. Now, I mentioned there was about 5 interactions. The other 4 were not very pleasant. I had one where I was a desk supervisor. He came down to visit. He was asking about some programs. We were having problems getting our cyber program where it needed to be. And the problem we had was a lot of the older agents were, just weren't comfortable with cyber. It was usually the younger agents that were more enthusiastic about it. And I'd found a couple of younger agents that had a little bit of education on it, or I think one of them actually had a bachelor's degree in computer science. And I said, these guys would be ideal. Once we would start getting them trained, because they were younger agents, Mueller had instituted this policy that if you're in a small office like Jackson, Mississippi, after you've been there 3 years, you're going to be transferred to a large office. And we started losing agents. I'd get them trained and we'd lose them, and we weren't getting any backfill in a timely fashion. We just didn't have people to work the program. And Mueller was asking my analyst about it, and she was trying to explain, and she was having difficulty. And I said, "Sir, if I can speak, the problem we're having is we need somebody with some technical ability and aptitude and desire to work this program. And that tends to be the younger agents. And once I get them trained, or where they're comfortable in operating on their own, they get transferred out to a larger office, and we don't get a backfill for months and months and months." And he's just said, "So you're trying to tell me it's my 3-year rotational policy that's a problem?" And I looked him dead in the eye and I said, "Yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm telling you." And then he laughed. He laughed about it. He didn't give a crap. He didn't care. I'm trying to, help, protect the liberties of individuals, to get our cyber program where it needed to be. And I'm being mandated to get things done. And then, it's sort of like, swimming in a pool and somebody keeps throwing you bricks, and you got to hold on to the bricks. You can't do it. So we got some news in that Robert Mueller had passed away. He was suffering from Parkinson's. anybody that saw him testify before Congress knew that the Parkinson's was just running rampant through him. He was disoriented. He didn't understand what was going on. I think at the beginning of the Russia hoax investigation that he was looking into, I think his faculties were there. I saw a lot of things inside the FBI where things were moving around, and I'll give you some behind the scenes stuff about how that worked. So when the Mueller investigation was starting, he needed assistance. So you're going to have a bunch of FBI agents that are going to be assigned to the special counsel to go out and do the interviews, to serve subpoenas, to execute search warrants and all of that. DOJ just can't do, they can't do that. They don't have the authority to do that. The FBI does. So I started noticing some things. We would see canvases for people to go up and work on the special counsel. The way it works in the FBI is if they don't get enough people to volunteer to go work on the special counsel, there'll be a certain number that's sent out to divisions, and you just have to give up names. You have to send somebody up there. So you won't be a volunteer, you'll be a voluntold. Now, senior agents have the experience that if you don't want to do something, there's a way to keep from doing it. As you'll find if you're fortunate enough, as I was, to be an FBI agent, that once you get very senior in your tenure in the FBI, you tend to be able to be a little more candid with your thoughts, especially with the executive management. It's sort of like when I was in the Air Force. I remember a conversation we had over an Incirlik turkey in the 80s, and we're standing in munitions control, and Chief Rufus Holman, an E9, the highest ranking enlisted person in our squadron, was in there, and there was a young lieutenant that was in there with him. And the chief was talking about something. Of course, he was smoking a cigarette. Back then, you could smoke in this room, this windowless room, just smoke everywhere. And the chief was talking, and he was trying to direct some things that were going on. And the lieutenant, an officer, kept interrupting him. And the chief just said, "Lieutenant, can you just shut the F up and let me talk right now?" Normally, you wouldn't be able to talk to an officer like that, because that lieutenant, even a brand new 01 butter bar lieutenant, straight out of officer training school, outranks the highest ranking enlisted person. But here's the thing, that chief is the most senior enlisted person that's there and has a wealth of corporate knowledge. And if that lieutenant really wanted to push the issue, his superiors, officers, would shoot him down and say, "You don't talk to the chief that way." The chief can make things easier for you. He can make things very, very difficult for you. So you've got to work with him. He's got the corporate knowledge. He's been here longer than you have. So as you get more senior in the FBI, you are able to be a little more candid based on your experience. You'll find, at least I found, once I got to that, 16, 17, 18, 19 year point, even with the special agent in charge, I was always very professional when I was in group settings, calling him Mr. This, or, SAC, the SAC said this or something. But when we were in casual settings, like if he came by my office or I was in his office, or there were times when we were traveling around the state, his first name was Chris. I just called him Chris. We were both about the same age. So it wasn't, the fact that he had been in the FBI, I think about a year and a half longer than I had. He just decided to go further through the management path than I was comfortable with doing. I just wanted to work cases, which is why I stepped out of management. That and some other things we talk about another day. I wasn't pushed out of it. I was like, I just don't want to be around this. And just a little teaser, the people I didn't want to be around had to vacate the FBI pretty quick in retirement because the criminal division was coming after them in an investigation. They got run off. Of a story for another day. So people are upset right now because Robert Mueller dies, and they say you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. And I kind of agree with that. And then there was Trump's reaction. Robert Mueller just died. I'm glad he's dead. He can no longer hurt people. That gets a little harsh. What do you think? A little harsh? Think it's insensitive? All right, I'll tell you what I think about it. I thought about this for a while. You know, I look back over some of the comments that President Trump has made, and he was very cordial, respectful, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Same thing with Jesse Jackson. Mueller's a little different. Mueller did a lot of things to the president. And I ask you, walk in Donald Trump's shoes. You have this guy that is the face of the collusion that came against you, that attacked you, your family, gave people the ideas they could get away with things like maybe shooting the president. Think about the hundreds of people that Robert Mueller caused harm to. How many people had to spend money that they didn't have to try to defend themselves against charges that were untrue? How many search warrants were executed under the Mueller special counsel? Almost 500 search warrants. Now, that's not DOJ executing those search warrants. They're directing FBI agents to go do those search warrants. And I'll give you another little background. A good chunk, or a large number of the FBI agents that were working on that special counsel weren't senior agents like I was. This was 2016 area. So I'd been in the Bureau about 17, going on 18 years. It was unlikely. Well, I wasn't going to volunteer to go work on the special counsel, number one. And number two, I definitely wasn't going to entertain if the front office came and said, you got to go. I think they knew better than to send somebody like me, because what senior agents tend to do is they tend to ask follow-up questions when they're given orders or direction to go do something. Like, why are we doing this again? Is there not there's a better way of doing this, and you come up with it? Younger agents don't have the tenure and experience that they can ask those questions. And even if they had the thought to ask those questions, because they haven't been in that long, it's very difficult for them to get any attention from somebody. So I remember, I'm gonna have to go back and see which one it was, if it was the Roger Stone search or what it was. But I remember seeing something inside the FBI in the affidavit for the search warrant. And I figured out who the affiant was on the search warrant. And it was somebody that'd been in the Bureau, I want to say, maybe 2 years or less. And I'm looking at this warrant that's being sworn out, and I'm like, man, I would never swear out that warrant. But if you're a young agent, maybe you're still on probation, or you just got off probation, and you're being told by some senior executives in the FBI or DOJ to go do this, you tend to just not say anything and just go do what you're told to do. They're telling you everything's okay. So you're thinking, okay, well, I'm at least protected based on this. Well, you're still supposed to protect the liberties of individuals, even those that you disagree with. So there's a guy that's on X out there, Shipwreck Crew, Bill Shipley. I've never met him in person, at least I don't think I have. I've had some online conversations with him. I'm in a little DM group with him and 3 other people. And probably one of the smartest guys I know legal wise and definitely one of the most knowledgeable guys about the way things operate within the Department of Justice. I would say, and he would probably disagree, and I would disagree with him. I think I'm a little more adept on the Constitution and its applications. But as far as the way things, the history and the way things operate within the DOJ, he's probably the top guy I would go to ask questions about it. And I've asked questions about it, and I've lauded him for his knowledge on U.S. code and its applications. But here's what he had to say on X about the Mueller investigation. And he talked about all of these millions of dollars that were spent. There's almost 500 search warrants. And they came up with these two businesses, foreign businesses in Russia. And, they could have had it sealed because the individuals that were named, these foreign individuals, they probably made trips back and forth to the U.S. But when you hold a foreign entity, like a foreign business, under indictment, you kind of think they're never going to come here to fight it. They're just going to stay out of the United States. Well, that wasn't the case. So you had one of these companies decide to send an attorney there to fight it, to say, we're not guilty of this. And they were routinely losing, the DOJ was routinely losing this battle once somebody stood up and started fighting back. So this whole Russia collusion thing came down to, they identified maybe 2 foreign businesses. That's it. Everything else was just fictitious and fake. So are you mad enough yet? What are you going to do about it? Well, you do what you got to do. I will tell you what I do. And it's been successful for me. It's gotten me to this point. It's gotten to the point where I get called from time to time for counsel on some things from some names that you would know. And I'm not out here trying to brag or anything like that. If I was going to brag about it, I'd tell you who the names are. But what I do is I look for opportunities. So if I see my elected representative, if I see Michael Guest out somewhere, he's at the grocery store, at the ball fields, at a football game, if I see him at a luncheon and I get the opportunity to speak with him, I've always got a couple questions in my back pocket that I want to ask. And they're not gotcha questions. They're things that he should know. So Michael has been a pretty decent guy to talk to. He does at least converse with me. He'll come up, if he sees me somewhere, he'll come up and speak, and we're civil with each other. I don't like him as my representative. I don't think he represents me well. And I hope that somebody runs against him and takes that position, somebody that's a better representative. But what I do is I just calmly and civilly and with certainty, I just ask a question. And the representative has some choices. They could be like Roger Wicker's office, where I can't get through the hurdle of his staff. We'll get that resolved at some point. But when I do ask them questions, I try to do it in a public place, and I do it with witnesses around. And because I want people to see that I'm not this huge threat physically or emotionally around these senators. I'm just asking them questions. I think I'm a threat to them because the questions I'm asking are a little tough for them to answer. And I make sure the witnesses are around. So if you approach your representative, you see him at the grocery store, you see him at the ball fields, you see him at church in the parking lot as you're leaving, go up and ask him questions. Hey, where are you at on the SAVE Act? Are you going to push this thing through? We all want it passed. Get it done. Are you going to do it? And if they tell you, well, I'll support anybody that puts their effort into it, and I'll try to get behind. No. I want you to do it. I want to know what you're going to do. Get very specific with your questions and ask them. Now, they can tell you to pound sand. They could walk away from you and just ignore you. They could yell and scream at you. I've had that happen to me, not from a representative or a senator. I had a state GOP member yell at me because I was asking a question of my congressman in an open forum. That pesky little First Amendment right to petition and seek redress review was this? Yeah, that. So ask them questions. If they do any of those things where they won't answer your questions, or they lie to you, or they yell at you, or tell everybody. Same token, if they give you the answer that you're looking for, I'm going to do everything I can to pass this. I'm working with Mike Lee right now. We're going to get the SAVE Act passed. If there's anything you can do to help me, let me know. And as your representative, I'm going to do everything I can to get this done. They tell you that, you tell everybody that as well. The problem we have is there's not many Mike Lees out there that are willing to push this. There's not many Anna Paulina Lunas that are willing to push this. We're starting to see who's who. We've even got some of the allegedly faithful MAGA people like Lauren Boebert, who's starting to kind of waver, I would say. So my parting question to you is, are you mad enough yet? Because you got to get mad. You still got to maintain your composure. And you got to fight. And the way we fight is by holding our representatives accountable, not just through the ballot box, but by exercising your First Amendment right to petition and seek redress. Are you willing to do that? Rand Paul seems to think that violence is not the answer. We got pretty violent in the Revolutionary War. We got pretty violent in the Civil War. We got pretty violent in World War I and World War II. Sometimes violence is the answer. It's as I said earlier, learn to fight, and when need be, learn to fight violently and decisively in your actions, because your life may very well depend on it. I know in this debate, our republic depends on it. So are you mad enough yet? I don't want you to get mad enough and act out in violence. What I want you to do is confront civilly and cogently your representatives and get this thing passed. Brett Baer, if you're out there, or if anybody gets a message to Brett Baer, the next time you have John Thune in front of you and he tells you something like, in modern times, we haven't seen this filibuster used, please remind him of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and how citizens and a president held our representatives' feet to the fire. And after 60 days, they gave in and instituted the will of the people. And the same thing can happen here. So keep burning up those phone lines. Whenever you see your representatives out, talk to them. Get that information in front of them. Well, it's 10 p.m. here in Madison, Mississippi. I need to get some things done before I turn in for the night. Got the granddaughter coming in the morning. Looking forward to that. I want to thank you for the time, especially if you're listening to me. If you need anything, don't hesitate to give me a DM. I'll try to do what I can to answer the questions. But take the time to save your republic. We're coming up on 250 years here on July 4th. I vividly remember the bicentennial. I was in the 6th grade. It's a republic if we can keep it. And by we, I mean you. So are you mad enough yet? Are you willing to come out of your shell and ask the questions? Will you make those phone calls? Will you show up at events where your representatives are? Will you have a couple of pre-prepared questions in your head that when you bump into them in public, that you'll ask them those questions? And then tell everybody how it turned out. You can do it. Trust me, you can do it. You'll feel a sense of calm come over you if you're well prepared and you start asking those questions. I'm going to try to do some more of these. I was talking to my brother-in-law today. We're going to try to get into the habit of doing these at least once a week. Maybe we'll pick up from there. I've just been so busy lately. I apologize for not getting out there more. But we're at a turning point in our nation right now, especially with the SAVE Act. If our representatives can't get something passed like this, that the overwhelming majority of people, regardless of party, support, then are we well represented? And what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Thanks for taking the time to meet with me today. I've got my Alabama shirt on. I got to punch in and see how Alabama's doing against Texas Tech tonight. They win tonight. They're in the Sweet 16. Hope they are. I like Nate Oates as a coach. I actually got to meet him. Pretty nice guy. Just a dad like me. Well, he's not a grandfather yet. But anyway, take the time to fight for your country. Pray. You can get this done. And God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And we'll see you again on this Blunt Force Conservative podcast.